Hello and welcome to Warblog. Today we're looking at the Battle of Tetovo. Okay. It's an interesting game. I always start off with saying that. I wonder if there are any games that are not interesting. But what's sort of mainly interesting to some extent is the challenge of there not being sort of a main front. Now, the main thing about this scenario is that it took place over quite a long time, sort of several months in fact, and there were 3 clear stages according to Wikipedia. So it's one of those games that falls into the sort of category of you can't necessarily play this sort of as a day-to-day sort of type game. You know, for example, many of the scenarios you'd be playing at sort of, I don't know, one turn is like 3 hours, or one turn is 6 hours, etc., etc. Here, in this scenario, the way I've envisaged it, and you know, in the same way that hexagonals are abstract, time is abstract as well. The three categories essentially defined not so much by anything in particular, but to some extent by gaps. So what that sort of means is that you get a bunch of things and sort of they come on turn 3, turn 4, and essentially whatever's going to happen, probably in a game sense, is going to happen. You know, if these come on at turn 8, and then we're turn 11, everything's on the board, 12, 13, 14, 15, and then by the time you get to 20, you've probably completed whatever the first stage is, even though there was a much longer time period between these sort of changes, in the sort of the pace of what was happening. For example, there was a 2-week ceasefire, which later got broken, and there were several other sort of intervals where, you know, not a lot happened on a day in and day out basis. I've actually written this in the description a little bit. I think the conflict is sporadic, lasting several months with pauses in the conflict. I mean, you can even see the dates up here. I think March to August. You know, that's a good 5 months. But what I was sort of saying, for example, there might be, to model this, it might be advised that the players move between 1 to 3 units each per turn. Agreed. So what I'm sort of saying with that, once you play it, you might, instead of sort of moving everything from a sort of strategic point of view, you might say, okay, well, what happens on this particular point or moment is that we fire some rockets into the town. And that's what's happened, and that would be, you know, to some extent how the Wikipedia article paces the events of what happened. You know, so on such and such a date, a taxi driver was shot in a particular location, and that was pretty much all that it says. Now, the thing is, I suspect there might be a few more troops, but the thing is, what I'm trying to get to here is it's not like a sort of a Stalingrad situation where there's just, or Grozny, where it's just stomped full of troops defending, and then heavy artillery and armour trying to penetrate the city. You know, it just doesn't strike me like that. I mean, in Wikipedia sort of states that in a lot of instances people were just going about their ordinary lives, you know, whilst at the same time there were these sort of events happening. And I think this is sort of typical of a lot of modern war, and it's something that, you know, I try to encompass with the way I present the games. Not so much present them, but present them in their sort of structure and format. For example, in this one, you know, we have just these units, and that's the presentation of it, because there's not a lot. So there's definitely not enough units to sort of say, okay, we're going to form a heavy defence in these units, you know, and we need to get all these hexes in order to coordinate an assault onto this hex. You know, it's never going to happen really. I have played this a little bit because I was just relaxing, and I thought, I'll give that one a go, because it's a bit unusual. So I sort of know how the first 5 turns go. So Anyway, so the first turn, and I thought, well, hang on, the first turns are quite unusual, because on your National Liberation Army turn, what you do is you riot, so there's not much to riot about, is there, really? Other than the fact that the objective is worth 10 Tetovo, so you're in the objective, and you're rioting, or protesting, I should say. So, that's your protest. I'm not even going to try and pretend to be a protester. I sort of thought, when I was doing it earlier, I made some protester noises, but I don't think it's really appropriate. So I'm not going to do that, but they're protesting. If you want to make protester noises and wave the counter around to represent that's what you're doing on your first turn. But the point is, there's nothing to do on the first turn. You're there, you're the only person on the board protesting. There's no police, there's nothing, so you know, you're winning, so to speak, if you consider protesting to be a win, etc, etc. So next turn, well, again, there's nothing because it's the first turn, so there are no police units on the first turn. I don't have the ability to sort of say, okay, on the first turn, but on their first turn these units arrive, so basically they're taking over the town. That's what they're doing. Tetovo, Wikipedia article does detail exactly what they were protesting. They're basically Albanians, and they want to they're all about separatists. They're separatists because the majority of people in Tetovo, I think, are Albanians. It's near the Albanian border. Pretty sure it's near the Albanian border. And that's near towards the northern border. But I can't remember whether Albania was in the north or whether it's to the east or west. But anyway, so there's a lot of that after Czechoslovakia or Yugoslavia or whatever collapsed, and they sort of said they didn't. You know, if you read the Wikipedia, it gives you the ins and outs. That's not what this is about. You know, so you can get to move that around, but it's not your turn. So you can anyway. So you get onto the next turn, and it starts to get interesting actually, because then you've sort of got your police units, and you sort of think, okay, well, again, as I said, it's not the sort of thing that has a front line. Well, we've got some infantry units up here. You sort of think, well, you know, would they really be bringing the army out so soon? Now, what you can do is you can then try to clear the protesters with your police units. However, I actually did this, and I did win. I forced them back, but the odds are actually not really in your favour. I think the odds was a 1 to 2. So much so that I thought, well, if I do this, I know if I do this now, when I record it, I probably won't get the same odds. I did actually win, but just to replicate what I did, and I suspect that I'll probably even lose this, because the thing is, they're in dense urban, which is a bit unusual, but the thing is, protesters have a defence of 0 unless they're up against police, in which case they can fight against the police. So it's not completely unrealistic. That is how the game works. They're in dense urban. Now, the thing is, I think what you've got to distinguish here is the difference between protesters as, you know, people sort of protesting for the rights of cats, and, you know, women, and, you know, women protesting the rights of cats, who are not going to throw bricks at the police. You've got to assume that these protesters are actually, even though they've got a 0-0, are highly antagonistic. That's why it's a war blog, you know, so they're probably already at the stage of throwing anything they can, making barricades. It's that sort of level. So the police are obviously going to try and do what they do. So it's actually not the police. It's not the these people, the Macedonians' turn yet. It's the National Liberation Army turn, and Albanian protesters. So again, they're actually now taking over Tetovo, and they've been doing it for one turn. They've only got another 20 turns to go, and they would win. So that's what they're doing. And now it's at -8, so they've got to get it up to 10. So that's 18 turns left. But they're now in train, and they're now dug in. Now I should maybe make a note. I'm going to actually pause and make a note of that. I don't know. Well, I don't know actually. I don't know. Should protesters be able to dig in? Maybe they should. I've seen some pretty interesting films of people protesting. I mean, not just the traditional Paris, London riots and things like that, but people protesting in some, like a Ukrainian, some Eastern European country, and there were people, they were just everyone, not, when you look at France and London, for example, they're usually young thugs who, with their balaclavas, and it's a riot. It's a very different thing. But these are actually the people. You could see that there were people, and they spent the day putting everything into roads, like cars and bins and benches and furniture and anything that they could get in these barricades. And then these tanks would just drive straight through them, because obviously they're trying to block, they're protesting, and they're trying to block these tanks from passing through. And the tanks did have a bit of a time. The first one was a bit of a struggle, but eventually they all sort of came through. And it's quite different, really, to sort of see how, that level of protestation. It was, these tanks would just pass through in convoy. They spent ages building these barricades. But anyway, so that's sort of, and maybe I should leave them doing that. But anyway, it's now, let's go on to the, this is a message. So the police are now going to try and do something about that. In theory, come on. Why not doing anything? Maybe the connection's not great. Okay, so anyway, so we're now going to try and get rid of these protesters. 1 to 2 odds and an exchange. I won last time, and at 3 is actually a pretty good roll. We've got an exchange. At 1 to 2 you can expect to lose. So these protesters are really sort of there. Now the thing is, you've got to read the Wikipedia to really sort of follow the plot here, to realise that this is actually not a bad model, a simulation of what was happening. Now, the protesters were protesting, but the police were sort of dealing with them. But people started firing on other people, and then the police started firing on the people, not the people that were firing on them, but to other people, and it's quite confusing. But the point is, you got this sort of situation where there's just these 2 units facing each other. Now, if they hadn't dug in, that would have been a little easier. I mean, what were the odds? It was 1 versus... So the reason it's a 1 to 2 is because they're dug in, so they got a point, 12.5%, so they've got 1.125 defence. So they're obviously attacking at a 1, it puts them at a disadvantage, so it puts it down to 1 to 2. So it makes that they're being dug in makes all the difference. If that was a 1 to 1, the 3 would have probably been a DR. So... now I knew that in advance, that it was going to be tough. I couldn't remember the exact reasons, but now maybe that dug inness is part of it. And what I would have maybe done is got all these other police units involved as well. I didn't do that this time because I wanted to sort of demonstrate that sort of one-to-oneness there. For example, I could put in these 2 units now, so I could have done these on 3, so we should have better odds. So that's a 2 to 1, and we still got an exchange. But if we got 3, it would have been a DR. So now we've got this full-scale sort of riot with all these protesters, holding the police off. And you've got to remember, they might not have. We haven't got the right dice roll. I mean, when I did it, they retreated first time, so it was quite interesting. But now they're standing their ground. The only other thing to maybe make a note of here, in the Wikipedia it says that the National Liberation people basically ran rings around the slow-moving Macedonian infantry units. We'll get onto them when they appear. That's why they've got a 2 movement. Even the police are moving faster than them. This demonstrates their their slowness, basically in general. So that's why they've got 2 movement. That's deliberate. So, and we end that turn. So now what we start to do is we see some more police units coming on. Now I haven't really sort of mastered this in the sort of sense of an acute balance, but we also got these people. Now these people in the Wikipedia are basically firing from the hills. So the hills are very close, and they also got mortars. Now the mortars have a range of 2. When I played the first time around, they weren't working because I put the range in. But so we've got some more infantry down here, but they are slow. We've got some more infantry just sort of appearing here. So what actually ends up with, I was sitting there thinking, well, you end up with this picture sort of building up that's quite complex. But if you look at it, there's only one real unit, some artillery and a bunch of protesters. But really we've got quite an involved and in-depth story of what's happening going on here. And to some extent it's not completely, unrealistic. And we've also got some more units up here now. I'm going to have to move him because he will take forever to move. I forgot to move him the first 2 times I played it previously. But also the irregulars start shooting at the police, and this I think will be a 1-to-1. Now what I didn't do last time was fire my mortars first, so I'm going to fire my mortars first, just that's the gamer and me trying to get the advantage of firing the mortars first. So we've caused a little bit of damage, and now I'm going to attack them with my irregulars, and I'm also going to put my protesters in there. It gave me a 2-to-1, which is quite interesting. But that was just an exchange. So again, we've just got this exchange, and these odds are not sort of fantastically brilliant, but when you read the Wikipedia through and follow it, it talks about how these NLA people, National Liberation Army, were just firing from about 1.5 miles away from the hills into the town at these people, and that's sort of what's happening whilst these protests were going on. So we fired at our mortars, and we've now got some irregulars on. Now the Wikipedia does actually state they're sort of 115th Brigade or Division or something like that, but I haven't given them a designation, just because it's, as I keep saying, it's an odd structure, so I've sort of just given them these basic units. But it seems to be going fairly well so far with regards to sort of how I might expect it to sort of work. So it's now the Macedonians' turn. Now obviously the thing here is to probably bring out infantry in. I think we might have a slow connection. Yeah, it's slow. It's going to. There we go. Right. Okay, he's moving now. See the police rocket along 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I've got along at 5 there. There's infantry just slow. I think it's about as far as I can go. And I've got him. Okay, so right. Well, I think the first thing to do is try and get rid of these protesters. And look, he's all moved up. Okay, we've got 3 police units now to try and quell this riot. Oh, and we eliminated them, but that was because they had already had 3 depressions, so presumably when they got this DE, that put them up to sort of something like 6, which is a 60% chance of the result DE taking effect. So they could have got that DE and just routed, but it's what you might expect with protesters. We don't expect them to sort of stand around, but it's that activity, it's that challenging and defeating the protesters that sort of essentially push this into what it is, the civil war, and that's one of the things that I'm very keen on with war blogging. It's that distinction and that evolution, but from just simple rioting, just simple protesting. I'm not trying to sort of promote that's how it works, but that is the genesis of it, and it makes you think, really. That's all I'm saying. But but the thing is, this wasn't the first battle. They were already sort of partly at civil war anyway. There's another one in there I was thinking of doing, and I think it happened slightly before. So it's all a bit odd, and these are all a bit odd. I mean, it is what's it called? The war is the 2001 insurgency in the Republic of Macedonia. So it's actually one of those sort of more opaque or obscure conflicts that really was just sort of very exaggerated civil disorder. So that's what's happening. So he's moved, so we can now push the police, presumably, into these areas to maintain order. Now we're not going to go into there, but police units did go into the hills so the police were quite active. And the thing that I don't have necessarily is a full balance between how many police units are being used and how many military units are being used. And the thing that I'm way down on the sort of total numbers, but I didn't want to sort of just stuff it full when it was sort of a historically, not so much historically accurate, but a historically defined situation. Whereas the more modern ones today, I'm quite happy to just make up numbers because there is no one really knows. But here, when it's quite clear, sort of what the orders of battle were, narratively speaking, it's slightly different. So it could be that there were more police units, etc. But they did go up into the mountains, which is basically the terrain of the NLA, to sort of to deal with them. But as I said, you can see here now there's the infantry, which are described as being fairly slow, and then the irregulars, who I've given them more. So they've, instead of having 113, they've got 112 to make them slow, and these ones have instead of 113, they've got 114. Now I don't know how much more of a difference that will make in these hills, but that's why I've done that. So these are going to be faster. They're not motorised. That represents throughout. I generally use fairly consistent numbering, but it's always relative. So you might have an infantry company here with 11 strength. That doesn't mean it's better than a battalion in another scenario with a 6 strength. It doesn't mean that. It just means it's all relative. So that's what. And this one's an example of that relativity. Kicking in really to some extent. Anyway. They've moved, so I didn't. What was I going to do? I said I was going to do something. I can't remember now. That's the thing. I've got a brain that's like a sieve, and I was going to say I was going to do that, and then I said, right, I'm going to do that, and then I didn't. I'd have to watch the video again. Because the reason I'm sort of thinking that is because what I'm going to do is put a little bit of code in it. It's quite simple. That when they're at 0, as he is, he'd be greyed out, so I'd be able to see that. He'd be greyed out. I think that might be a big help. He's at 0.5, so he wouldn't be greyed out, but he still pretty much can't move. He can attack that. He'd be greyed out. He'd still have some movement. So these two units can attack that, but I'm not going to do that because they're going to get such a defence and they're just police. So we're role-playing a little bit there. Although interesting at this moment is the city. So that's that. As you can see, we're getting a few more units coming in now. I'm going to try and sort of move this artillery down. See, they can move 2, which is quite good, through wooded hills. I mean, that's pretty good. So that fog is giving them that edge. I'm sure if these moved in there, they'd only be able to go 1. We've got 2 units here. So already we can see that this wooded, this hilly area is the terrain of of the NLA, and you can almost envisage that sort of attrition that they face, over the city there. The only thing that they don't have that would maybe truly reflect that is the ability to do sort of indirect fire. That's why I put these mortar units in, and these are actually artillery units. They're bigger, 1 offensive and 4 range. So this is just mortars, and these are artillery. Same difference, but this is what they're doing. They're basically just firing in lots of artillery. I mean, that's what it says in the Wikipedia, so that's what that's all about. So it's less about trying to attack the city, but more about sort of causing this sort of degree of attrition. And so to reflect that, he's got one depression, so we're actually going to fire out mortars onto him. No effect, that's not a problem. And this is sort of a small skirmish assault. 1-to-1, forcing them back. Well, that's not too unbelievable. I think it's a better game for the 1-to-1s, the 1s-to-2s, the 2-to-1s in that sense, because there's no major strategic loss, because there's no lines. It's not as though we're doing this attack and then our front line is completely blown apart. You know, we just pushed back into the hills, which is where we're going to go and come from. Now, the only thing we'll probably have to do is to recover, and they're always going to be permanently 1 depressed now because they're at 3. But, you know, that wasn't a bad result. And I think, you know, in a game like this, you could probably afford to take more 1-to-2s and 1-to-1s in the knowledge that, you know, your attacks might fail, and that's all they are. So we tried to attack these police units here, but failed. You know, so these are probably not particularly strong and powerful regulars. Probably just, you know, a lot of people that have now got guns, and the police were just fairly effective. It could have been that they attacked and then they lost heart halfway through and ran away. You know, we can't necessarily say that these were sort of superior in combat. There could be lots of other reasons for that, but that's what happened there. So we saw that, and it's like another thing. You can sort of sit there and say, well, you know, what would the newspapers reports look like for that action on that day? I mean, is this sort of the second week of what's happening, etc., etc. And the only thing that sort of throws a little bit of a spanner in that timescale is that you can't imagine these taking a week to get down there. It's not that far, but that's that really. So that's everything moved. Okay, so we've got some more reinforcements here. And so at the moment we've got the Macedonians pretty much in control of the urban areas. We'll leave them there, I think. We'll leave them there. And this is a pretty tough one. It's tougher than these ones. They've still got the reduced movement. Now once I've got these into place, I will then sort of consider, do I want to sort of start advancing to take these out? And that's what they did later on. Not quite yet. So now we've got more units coming on. So you start to look at the map, it looks quite complex and busy. Now what we've also got on down here, now we're on the end later, is this German NATO unit. Now basically the Germans had 1,200 troops in these barracks here, and at the start of combat their barracks were hit by a stray mortar round, and a couple of German soldiers were killed. So they moved all their 1,200 German NATO troops out of there. You know, which struck me as a bit odd really, because I don't know what they're doing there. They're German, which always sounds a bit odd. Obviously it's legitimate, I mean that's what it was, but it struck me as it's the first time I've seen German units in doing anything. And they have Leopard tanks, which I thought was a bit odd, because I thought after the Second World War the Germans were not allowed to have tanks anymore, but presumably there's been some restrictions on that. I mean, I know the Treaty of Versailles said they were not allowed to have certain things above certain sizes, and this is one of the reasons why all their tanks had less than 20mm cannons on them at the beginning of the Second World War, or a lot of them, and their ships are all small and etc, etc, because they had to sort of build their armed forces within those confines. But although I think it became clear, I think even during the Spanish Civil War, that they were ignoring that, but there were still some traces of that in play. I can't remember, I don't know much about that, but anyway, they've got some Germans here now. They basically come on, and so I've written it up in the rules. They're not supposed to do anything else other than protect the barracks and these areas. So the areas that are objectives they can protect and defend, but they're not going to do anything with this hex, they're not going to do anything with this, and they're not going to go off hunting for these units. Now this is the first one. This is basically represents a bunch of opal armoured cars and 2 Leopard tanks. It's not their turn yet. So this unit under there is going to recover. He's at 3. We've got these guys. We're going to put our mortars down on. Well, let's go for the heart of town. What's here on depression wise? 0, 0. Ooh. Well, he's already been upset, so let's go for him. No effect. Okay, well, let's now attack this police unit. 4-1 and an exchange. So they're still on the outskirts here. They're still trying to harass these Macedonian units. Still doing that sort of firing from the mountaintops. You can see there's a lot more of them coming into the field. Oh, I should have done that way. Okay. Let's see. Oh, well. So I'm going to move them through the woodlands. So we've got quite a big force coming in along here, and this set of units here. So the thing I'm trying to demonstrate here to some extent is how it evolves and how it grows. And you know, I'm openly accepting that it might not so much fall to bits, but it probably go one way or the other sooner than later. It's not sort of balanced in the sense that I think you can get through the full 5 months. I was going to do it 3 times, but I don't want to do that, you know, because the variance would be quite different. You get the idea, you get the sense of what's happening, you get the, you know, the fact that they're coming from the hills, you know, that there's a lot of police units involved, that the Germans were involved, etc., etc. Now, I was going to put the 12,000 units in there, and then you'd have to remove them from the board, but it seems a bit superfluous, really, so I haven't done that. So we're at the barracks. I'm going to leave them there for the time being. Well, it costs them over 1 to move there, so they're very slow. Okay, well, considering they're attacking there, we're going to stack up in that. We're going to stack up there as well, and there. And we might as well really go for it here. Now, it seems as though we'll blow this unit away, but really, what are the odds? I mean, he's going to be worth probably about 3. I don't know, in the wooded hills. He's got a depression, but we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that could only be a 2-to-1, and some of these are probably depressed. So we'll see what the odds actually are. 2-to-1. There you go. Now they had a slight bonus because they had the surround and an exchange. So it's interesting how that sort of I think that, to me, that again, I'm quite often monitoring the balance of, you know, the combat results, and I think results like that are good, you know, in a sense that you should be able to sort of do these sorts of things and to have things working out, you know, reasonably well. I mean, if these were all like strength 4s or 5s, you know, we would expect different results. But a 2-to-1 is always a bit of an odd. It's always a bit of a. It's not certain odds factor to be going at. 1-to-1 is like not in your favour at all. 1-to-1 is usually against your favour because, you know, in order to attack you need like 3-to-1 odds minimum in general. 2-to-1 obviously is better, and that's what we had there, but it's not certainty, and in this case we had the 2-to-1, we failed, etc., etc. So I think that's working out quite nicely, but we're getting a nice little level of attrition. It's not as though we can, you know, knock everyone back and take over the whole town in the first 2 turns. But the thing is, these things could happen. I mean, we could have got an AR on there, I think, on the 2-to-1. I'm not sure whether that is possible. It might be possible. I'll have to look at the combat result table. Maybe I'll actually do that just out of general interest now. I hardly ever look at the rules, but I realise that maybe people trying to play might sort of look at the rules and say, "Oh, your rules are rubbish," and I'll say, "Well, I don't look at them, so I wouldn't know." I just play it, you know. combat results. There it is. So under the 2 to 1, we can't get an AR, but we can get an A. Look at that, 3 AR results in a 1 to 1. That's interesting. So I think the combat result table is quite good, but I've not really paid a lot of attention to it. And I can maybe shift one of those ARs into the 2 to 1, but I'm happy with that. You know, I don't see why an attack and retreat should necessarily happen. I've got the degree of variance on the 1 to 12 result instead of 2d6, so I prefer the 1 to 12 because it gives much more contrasting results. No point in being average. Okay, we'll leave it at that. Lots more units now all piling in. This artillery is going to take forever to get anywhere. Now there was a bit of action in a village just north up there. But it's too far off. They take in an Apache 17. I think that's not an Apache, it's an MI Hind 17. And then later on they get some 24s, which are sort of more attacked like helicopters, but they take in some police units. I'm not doing that. It's just a bit fiddly. I suppose I could put in some airlift, but it was just a sort of more of a tactical thing. So the point is, you know, they did venture out into these woods to sort of deal with all these regular units. Because even these on their own, once they're in the woods, these irregulars are going to find it hard to attack them. Okay, well I want to leave him one more turn to recover because he's at 2. We've got the mortars. It's a lot harder here, but I think we can maybe at least send the mortars in on this. Do we want to attack? Might as well. Hopefully we won't get an AR. Oh! 2 to 1 and a DR. So, we've now forced them out. And I do think they did. We're only going to put 1 in there because I want to keep the front line there. So that was a newsworthy account of some sort of, you know, development there. Now, in theory, we've still got some movement. We could go for this one, but I don't want to push my luck because the odds were different because the police unit was at 3 down. I wonder what the odds actually were. Yeah, see, I'm below 10, so I'd be at 9.9 again. But he would probably be, if he got it back up to even 4.9, that would be a 1 to 1. And I'm happy with that result. Let's reload that. I'm happy with that result. Okay. Right. Well, we'll try and take that out. See if we can push them out. Huh. That was bizarre. Because the AR doesn't appear to have worked. I think if you get an attack and retreat on a regular unit, the AR doesn't take effect. I'm pretty sure that's actually how it is because when I set the irregulars up, I didn't want to make them too powerful. So it's a sort of an asynchronous CRT result in that extent, and that's what's happened there. They haven't done the AR. So you can actually attack these with a little more confidence when you don't have the brilliant odds, because you're not going to get an attack and retreat against just irregulars. But if they'd had some infantry in there, that would have been an AR. However, they do look to have suffered for the AR. They've got he's got 2 depressions now for that. So that's not good. And here's the other German unit. Well, we're going to sit these 2 out. So I'm going to put some artillery down onto, and I shouldn't be able to hit these, and I can't. They're out of range, which is good. Nice to see that work. It doesn't always work just because of the calculations, but we can definitely get that one. And put some artillery now in range, but he's moved. Not a big problem. At least we're getting there. Okay. Well, could probably do with pushing these guys out. Let's see what we can do here. We attacked them before, didn't we, and lost hideously. Why are we doing it again? Oh well. 2 to 1 and a DR. Well, this time we got the good result, so we push them out. And let's see if we can push these guys away. Two to 1 and an exchange. So it's a pretty exciting sequence of events there. I mean, we've been hacking away on the outskirts of the city from the hills. We've captured a small part of it once, but then been forced out. You know, it's. I think I quite like the way that's working. That was a sort of balance on mechanics, making it quite interesting. But this is quite a foreboding amount of units that we've got coming across there. In theory, there should be some balance with the Macedonians getting some kind of reinforcement in there. I think it's time to bring these guys down. Let's try attrition. Okay, I think I'll leave it at that. There's still a lot more to come on, but I'm wondering what the balance will be and how that will pan out. But I think, you know, from the point of view of giving you an idea of the sort of the order of battle and the process and the ebb and flow of what was happening, it's quite good. A good one. They're always quite difficult to do, these ones, when there's not really a clear front line. I mean, there's really a clear front line on this, and you might think there is, but you know, these units are very easy to push back, and you know they're occupying the sort of main hexes here. But the thing is, you could sort of play this differently. You could sort of think, okay, well, we're going to move down here, or I'm not going to attack. I'm just going to get my artillery pounding in here, which is what they did. You know, they just pounded it with their artillery, and that could make a difference. You know, forcing them to sort of just move back, and then coming in and then attacking them back. I think they get some artillery of their own on later, but not a lot. But I think that should give you some idea of the sort of the Battle of Tetovo, and you know, its part in the sort of the 2001 insurgency in the Republic of Macedonia. You know, not a particularly well-known conflict. I don't know much about it, but that's why I do these things. Sort of learn a little bit, slowly develop and build up. See what I'm doing at the moment. The actual portfolio of things for this. So obviously we've only got one at the moment, but add a few more, and after a while you can start to sort of. There's only one on that. There's a few here. I think the Pakistan war has two. You know, you can start to sort of look at them. Mozambique's only got one in there. I haven't actually done too many of this. I seem to be picking up the ones with ones. For example, the Nigerian Civil War was 1, 2, 3, and you can start to sort of put them together. I was looking at this earlier, and there was a lot more. So this one, there's quite a few, but that's a more recent thing. I think in the Rwandan Civil War there's 4, but the point is there's 5. Bit by bit you can build these things up and get an overview of the entire conflict, which is what this site is all about. And it's only just now, after 2 years, we're starting to get at least enough in these things to sort of have multiple pieces of a jigsaw. You know, there's all, you know, when there's only one piece of a jigsaw, it's not particularly great, but here we've got 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you can put that together and sort of say, well, okay, well, automatically we can see that this is going on from 88 to 90. You know, I don't know when it started or when it ended, but automatically you've got that idea, and you can see that this battle took place 2 years after this battle, maybe, etc., etc. But that's what this is all about, and obviously the 2001 insurgency in the Republic of Macedonia has only got one piece of the jigsaw in there at the moment, but obviously it's, you know, it's enough of a piece to give you an idea of that particular part of time and history, and hopefully I'll be able to. I'm actually starting to do 2 things at the moment. Now that's to actually sort of look at these. For example, I might go back and sort of say, okay, well, I've got this part of the Chadian War, and then to add more. But I mean, for example, I mean, I don't know really what I have and haven't got, but if we actually look at Chad, see we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We've actually got 5 in there. You know, and I'm pretty sure that this one, Chad 2006, and the Battle of Hamdan 2009, from the same one. It's just I haven't flagged this one up, so either this one or the other one is not flagged up. So this is Civil War in Chad, and this is Civil War in Chad, and this is the Chadian-Libyan conflict. And this is the Chadian Civil War. So, you know, you can sort of see there's quite a few. There's 3 distinct battles, there's 3 distinct wars. There's 2005 Civil War, and then there's the Chadian Civil War, the Chadian Civil War, 65 to 79, etc. So, you know, on this one, obviously the Chadian Civil War. So we've got the Civil War in Chad. It just goes on and on. But the point is, what I'm trying to do, I'm looking at these. So we've got the Civil War in Chad. Civil War in Chad and the Chadian Civil War. So we've got both of those, and we've got the Chadian Libya. So we've got all 3 of those. But what I'm saying is, what I'm trying to get to here is that there are, at the moment, 474 games, or 475 games, and not all of them are actually flagged up to their corresponding wars. I still haven't actually done that yet. I mean, it says here This is a new feature, and all scenarios are flagged up to their corresponding wars, 22nd of December. It's actually quite difficult to actually flag them up. I've got to go through them all one at a time, and when there's 400, there's no way I'm going to go through them all one at a time, and then I've got to create the war thing. But I've been adding them, and now you can see there's actually quite a list. And some of them, a lot of them are just ones, but as we've sort of gone through and sort of demonstrated, a few of them are a few more. To be quite honest, I don't want to. If there's only one, I'm going to add more to it. So, for example, we got 2 of this first Congo war. But what I'm trying to get to another extent, so we've done that. Look at that one. What I'm also, so if there's only one, I'm going to try and add some more. So I've got more pieces of the jigsaw. So I'm aiming for like at least 2 to 3, possibly more for each thing. I think it's a bit of a trick to only have one. For example, in the Greek Civil War, we've got 1, and there's a few more to add in there. So that's my objective. Another part of my objective, which maybe has a slightly higher weighting, just because I'm like this. I'm now going through and looking for wars that I haven't done before. So wars that are not on this list. So there's 2 ways of looking at that. There's the games, just generally. So for example, there's the Falklands War is not in there, I don't think. Or is it? Is the Falklands in there? Yeah, see, the Falklands is not in there, but we have a Falklands scenario, so I've got to flag that one up. So that's one that's not in there, for example. But if we just click into here, for example, we can see this is flagged up as the Vietnam War, but whatever this is from is not flagged up with any war, and that's obviously the Syrian Civil War. So we need to flag that up, like this one's been flagged up. This one has not, but it's the Syrian Civil War. This one is the Battle of Tessala. It's not flagged up, but it's something Mali in Africa. So that's another war. It might even say what it's from. It doesn't even say what it is, so that needs to be flagged up. This one's from the Korean War, so you can see what it is. If it's a sort of big thing there, the war is defined. This one here, Nigeria, I don't know what that is, but it's probably the Boko Haram insurgency, so I'd have to flag that one up. So there's a couple in here. This one here, there's another one. These probably go for the same sort of war, same dates, etc. Boko Haram insurgency, I think it's been called. So there's another 2 that haven't been done up. This one hasn't been flagged up for the Libyan Civil War. So what you can see is not all of them are being flagged up. So I want to go through and maybe do that, etc., etc. But also adding all the wars just to make this look like a real sort of potpourri of interesting things. I think at the end of the day, what we're sort of saying to a small degree and extent is that there were more wars than the Second World War, because a lot of people just focus on the Second World War and that's it, and their awareness of anything else is minimum. They probably know the Korean War and the Vietnam War and then a few other ones, but when you look at it, in a list form, it's really diverse, and this is the one I've just been doing at the moment actually. I just picked these ones out. I thought, I've not done the Sri Lankan Civil War before, so I picked them out and I haven't even finished them yet. So that's pretty much where it's going, really. I hope you find that interesting. Obviously, we're going into a new stage of maturity for the site now, I think, with more wars, more pieces of the jigsaws for each wars, and more depth, and getting to the extent where we've got enough now to start. It's like, I think someone was talking about bodybuilding, and in order to sort of do bodybuilding, you need to have some muscles in the first place, and you need to get there, and then once you've done that, then you can start toning up your pecs and your triceps and your abs, but you can't necessarily really do that until you've got the muscles in the first place, and we've got the muscles now, you see, so now we've got to start sort of, preparing for whatever it is. Going to the beach, I think, is what it's all about. So anyway, I hope that all makes sense. If you want to play any of these games, just sign up and all that, and have lots of fun, and I will speak to you later. Cheerio.